Okay. So I don't think my video is working, but hello everyone. The voice you're hearing is me, Catherine. I am an AmeriCorps member with the Vermont Land Trust, but I should say, and I am helping coordinate events that are happening online. And I know we're right at 12:30, so maybe we'll give it a couple more minutes before we start with the presentation. But I just wanted to welcome everyone. Today we have Rebecca Roman here, and then we are also partnering with some folks at VINS, the Vermont Institute of Natural Science. Oh my God, I should know this. And we will be talking about grasslands and birds and how all of that can relate to conservation and how you can be a part of that. So we're glad to see all of the people logging on. We're gonna have Q&As going. You'll see at the bottom of the screen the Q&A function. We will kind of have a Q&A time, I think towards the end, and Rebecca, you can tell me if that's true or not. And then there's also a chat function. So just familiarize yourself with that. And if everyone's ready, we can go ahead and get started. And we will be plugging in questions from the Facebook feed that is coming in, and also try to get to those too. So if you're with us on Facebook right now, don't think that we're going to forget about you.
Great. All right, are we ready to dive in then? Anna, are you good?
I'm ready to go whenever you are.
Yeah. Okay, great. Catherine, all good on your front?
Yes.
All right, let's launch this webinar. So welcome everybody. You're joining the Conservation and Birds in Vermont webinar, which is a partnership between Vermont Land Trust and VINS. I am Rebecca Roman. I'm a regional stewardship manager at the Land Trust.
And I am Anna Morris. I'm the lead environmental educator at the Vermont Institute of Natural Science.
Oops, let's see. Cool. So just to start, I would like to say that we're going to be talking about Vermont lands today and how we can protect, understand, and connect with that land. And I feel it's important to recognize that the first stewards of the Vermont land were the Abenaki people from whom the land was stolen. The Abenaki cared for it for generations and continue to do so today. So I encourage each of you to take a moment to pay respect and gratitude to the Abenaki peoples of the past and the present, and to honor all the land and all that it gives us. That is a land acknowledgement that was inspired by the Lake Champlain Waldorf School land acknowledgement from earlier this year. So if you don't know us, Vermont Land Trust is a conservation organization. We work with communities, with the land, with farmers, with individuals, with families, and we work to protect the working landscape of Vermont and the often the recreational landscape of Vermont as well, with a special emphasis on protecting sensitive areas like wetlands and things like that. Our mission is that the current and future generations are deeply connected to the land and benefit from its deliberate protection and responsible stewardship. We work all over the state of Vermont, and there's different folks who work in each region, but yeah, we're throughout the entire state. We have different regional offices, but you can find us pretty much anywhere.
And VINS, the Vermont Institute of Natural Science, or longer name, we are a nonprofit nature center, and we were established in 1972 over in Woodstock, Vermont, with the mission to motivate individuals and communities to care for the environment through education, research, and avian wildlife rehabilitation. Large part of my job is education, because we firmly believe that the more people know and care about the wildlife and wildlands around them, the more that they will be motivated to act to conserve those lands and to respect them for the inherent value that they have. On the other hand, we also do some wildlife rehabilitation. So we have a bird hospital right on site at our nature center in Quechee, Vermont, And we accept injured and orphaned birds from members of the public where our rehabilitators are able to heal them and get them released back into the wild so they can further fulfill their ecosystem services and their roles in our environment and in our land as well. And where does VINS work? We are much more kind of centrally located than the Vermont Land Trust, although we visit places all around the state of Vermont and New Hampshire. We are located in Quechee, Vermont, on our property here that backs up to Dewey's Mill Pond, to the famous Quechee Gorge along the Ottaquechee River. And this land has changed hands a lot over the years. It was owned by the sheep farmers for a long time. And then it was became a trailer park, and then it became a gravel quarry, and then it became a nature center. So the meadow here at VINS that we manage is actually right on top of an old gravel quarry, and is flourishing now.
Oops. So on today's agenda, we're going to start the conversation about conservation and what it means to us as humans and what it means to the land, the plants, the animals, the insects, everything else that's out there. And then we're going to be talking about the intersection between conservation and birds. And that's when we'll hand it over to Anna, and we'll see some of the wonderful birds that VINS has. And then we'll end it with a discussion, question, answer kind of time. So to begin with, what is conservation? Very simply, conservation is making sure that forests like this and beautiful farms like this don't become this, an overdeveloped area that doesn't really support anything except for houses. So that doesn't answer the question, why though? Why would we want to conserve land? What are we even protecting when we're conserving land? So we're protecting a lot of things. To start with, there is the human benefit of aesthetic, which is pretty important. I have felt during these COVID times of being able to go out on a drive and see beautiful scenery like this, or get out into the woods and find wildflowers and mushrooms and fungus and hear birds, and being able to be surrounded by such a beautiful landscape really has a pretty positive impact, I think, on us as humans. And conservation protects the land so that they'll maybe not look exactly like that forever, but they'll be used as a farm forever, or it'll be a forest forever. And so we'll always have that aesthetic. Another benefit is recreation. And that's, again, a human benefit, getting to be able to be outside. And, you know, I'd much rather either mountain bike or go on a hike in the woods than walk around a cul-de-sac again and again and again. So that's a pretty nice benefit of conservation, I would say, as well, and has been a great benefit during COVID. Another human benefit is access to local food. I think about how important it is and how lucky I find myself living in Chittenden County to be surrounded by so much local food and have it so readily available, and have access to that. And we do such a good job, I think, in the state at having access to it in many levels. For example, you can use your food stamps at farmers markets and stuff. So that's pretty cool. And, you know, having access to local food is not the case all over the country and in a lot of other states. And it's also not the case in every part of Vermont. But I think the work of conservation is making sure that we're not creating more, or we're not reducing the amount of farms in our state. Another benefit, these are all human benefits, I'll get to the nature benefits, is livelihoods. So many of the jobs in Vermont are so deeply connected to the land. You have foresters, you have farmers, sugar makers, loggers, woodworkers, ecologists, naturalists, conservation organizations. I'm employed because of the connection to the land. And that's continuing to do conservation, you know, deeply tied to making sure that these livelihoods can continue in the future. water quality, a nature benefit, and also pretty important human benefit. But having good water quality supports a lot more biodiversity, especially in streams. When you have really healthy streams, you can have many more different types of little bugs. They're called macro and micro invertebrates, crawling around under the rocks, and fish swimming in streams. Think about like how sensitive some fish species are to water quality and that. And of course, for us as humans, we want to have good water quality so that we can swim in or drink that water. A global benefit is carbon sequestration. Having large swaths of intact forest and making sure that they will exist in the future is important for carbon sequestration. The trees breathe just like we do, but they breathe in carbon dioxide. So as they breathe that in, they hold a lot of it inside of them forever until they fall and decompose. And that is really important for combating climate change going into the future. And then there's also ecosystem protections, which is a nature benefit. Having protections on areas means that these animals will remain, hopefully, in the future. For example, having like large swaths of woods, you can have moose who need like bigger habitats. Having rocky ledges, you can have the peregrine falcon and make sure that their habitats are protected. And having open pasture land is really beneficial for actually a lot of species like foxes and insects and voles and moles and groundhogs, and also for birds. And, you know, making sure that we have these sorts of diverse landscapes means that we can ensure that lots of habitats and animals are able to be supported and a part of our community. And with that, I will pass it over to Anna.
Yes, well, thank you, Rebecca. That was wonderful. And so much I want to say of conservation of animal species is about conservation of the landscape. Kind of the #1 issue faced by most vertebrate species, and who knows how many invertebrate species these days, is habitat loss, is losing access to those landscapes that they need in order to survive, to reproduce, to find food, and to fulfill their roles that are sometimes beneficial to humans as well as the wider landscape. So we always tell people that kind of the main overarching idea of conservation is to conserve habitats. And there are many little things that you can do, even if you're not a large organization like the Vermont Land Trust that's capable of going out and preserving these habitats. There are many individual things that you can help along the way. And so we will talk about some of those things that you can do right out of your own home. But before we do that, or kind of integrate it into that, I'm going to sneak off camera for just 5 seconds and get our very first ambassador bird we're going to meet today. So 5 seconds. Oh, goodness. Yes, he was ready to come see you guys. So, given that we are focusing today's talk on conservation of grasslands and meadowlands, I thought it was a perfect opportunity to talk about the American kestrel, which is a bird that inhabits meadowlands and grasslands preferentially. You haven't been this noisy in a long time. I'm surprised. So this here is Westbird. And Westbird is one of our ambassador raptors here at the Vermont Institute of Natural Science. Through our avian rehabilitation clinic, we sometimes receive birds that are not releasable into the wild. And those birds calm down. over how loud he's being right now, and I apologize. He will quiet down after a little bit of being out. But these birds, American kestrels, they unfortunately frequently end up as part of our rehabilitation hospital, not because of any particular injury that they sustain, but unfortunately because people take them out of their habitats. We're actually getting a lot of baby birds right now because it's springtime, and all birds outside, I'm sure you're familiar with the American robins, maybe the eastern phoebes, house finches that might be building nests under the eaves or on fence posts or hidden in a tiny crack in the side of your house. They're all having babies right now, and unfortunately those babies sometimes fall afoul of an accident. Maybe the nest falls out of where it's supposed to be. Maybe something happens to the parents and those babies need some care. And of course, we are able to take care of them at VINS until they're ready to go back into the wild. But sometimes those babies actually don't need care, and they would do much better if they were raised by their own human parents out in the wild, because they can be trained by their human parents to do all the things that they need to do in order to survive, such as hunt for prey and hide from predators. So Westford here, he was actually taken out of the wild as a baby bird, and we don't know the full story. We assume that someone with very good intentions wanted to help a helpless baby bird that they found, and they decided to bring him into their life and raise him up to be a full adult American kestrel. And then they decided it was time to release him into the wild because he was an adult and he was eating 2 or 3 mice a day at that point, I'm sure. And also making this noise a lot around their home. But he didn't go when they went and released him, and that's because he had become imprinted on human beings. And this is something that happens if you raise a baby animal in your care, especially the falcons, like the American kestrel. They can become imprinted on humans, meaning they identify more strongly with their human parents than they do with other kestrels, because honestly, that's all they know. So that's why Westford is screaming right now. It's because he sees me as a potential source of food. He doesn't know any better. He thinks humans give you food, just like his parents did when he was young. So he is ineligible to be released into the wild, which is really a shame because he's perfectly healthy otherwise. His wings work just fine. His eyes work just fine, his feet work just fine, all manner of things like that. And he could, in theory, be outperforming wild behaviors such as pest control. Now, these birds live in meadows because a lot of their prey also lives in meadows, and it's a good spot, a good vantage point for them to seek out their prey as well as watch out for predators. So a little bird like this, an American kestrel, could eat a field vole or a field mouse, a mole perhaps. A chipmunk is probably getting to be a little bit too big for him. He does weigh only about 4 ounces or 100 grams. But these birds also eat a lot of insects. They eat a lot of dragonflies and grasshoppers. And in terms of sustaining a farm without the use of huge amounts of fertilizer, huge amounts of pesticides, it's helpful to have some natural pest control around to be eating those grasshoppers and eating those mice. So Westford's pretty keen on the stuff that I have on the table behind me, which is some of his toys, essentially. That's a little bowl of sand that he has, and so he's taking a lovely dust bath right now, which is a common kestrel behavior that you'd find maybe on the edge of a meadow and a trail, or right in the middle of a really, really sunny place, a really sunny meadow, where there would be a little bit of sand or dirt for him to brush all the parasites off of his body. They can get by without having a stream or water to bathe in, but they are pretty clean obsessed. They're pretty cleanly obsessed. As he's showing right now, he's sort of digging his heels into the sand and picking up a bunch of dust, getting that all into his feathers, which will remove a lot of parasites who can't stand being in that dusty environment and can't stand, and some of that dirt as well. Seems weird to us to get dirt off by bathing in dirt, but that's what he's used to. So kestrels, as I mentioned, they eat a lot of rodents and insects. And so as these things go, Field mice, grasshoppers, they often are considered pests for human activities, especially farming, but also rodents can carry a lot of diseases and they can get into your home. So it's a really good idea to have kestrels around on your landscape, hunting and utilizing that space because it will provide you with some natural pest control. Now you might be wondering about how you might be able to attract kestrels to your meadow. You want to keep going? My goodness, too much. How you want to attract kestrels to your meadow if you don't already have any there. And our biggest suggestion is both to plant native plants. If you are unsure as to whether or not your meadow has native plants, I'm sure you can get in touch with several local gardeners that would know about native plants. The Vermont Land Trust might also have some resources about planting native for you to look into, because those native plants will better support the prey base of the American kestrel. But another thing that you can do, no, goodness gracious, that's actually his trademark behavior. That's how we knew that he was imprinted, was he had no qualms about landing on heads. Another thing that you can do is physically create a habitat for these animals to live in, because kestrels are naturally cavity nesters, which means that they seek out a hole in a dead tree. Dead trees can be kind of few and far between, especially in the middle of a meadow. There's not a lot of trees. And people have a tendency to remove dead trees, which is definitely a good idea if the tree is going to, fall on your house or on your land somewhere useful. You should get rid of that tree. But other dead trees actually provide great habitat for wildlife. If you don't have any dead trees, though, you can make one. And we do advocate people making and putting up kestrel nest boxes. So I had to cover that up because he's awful keen on his nest box. And it's demonstrating how a male kestrel might seek out several cavities in their area and check them out, see if that nest box is up to the specifications of what it would take to raise an average of 5 young in that little box right there. And once he's found a really good spot, he's going to invite the female to come over there and to check it out as well. Now, Westford being a male American kestrel who thinks that I am a female American kestrel, that little trilling noise he's making right now, he's inviting me to come by and check out the nest box and see if I want to lay any eggs in it. But were he a good kestrel, a wild kestrel who knew what he was doing, he would be doing exactly that behavior in a nest box that was over a meadow full of grasshoppers and mice and good things to eat. So that's a little bit about Westford and about American kestrels. And I want to know if we have any questions about this guy or about anything that we've talked about so far, conserving landscapes, especially grasslands and meadows. And I'm going to let him go back in his box because he super wants that.
So no questions so far, but we will keep them open and we can get to them in a different time.
It looks like Alan Greenberg and Liz Thompson both have their hands raised.
I see 2 people raised their hand. I'm not sure if we can let them speak or if they should type their question in.
This is Liz. This is earlier in the presentation. I was just alerting you to the echo, that's all. So no, I don't have a question. Thank you.
Great.
Thanks, Liz.
Sorry about that. I can get him a little closer to the camera so you can see all of his beautiful markings. Kestrels are extremely sort of detailed birds that have a lot of color to them. And they have a lot of these kind of black spots all up and down their body. He's also got 2 little black spots in the back of his head, which are meant to mimic a face.
Anna, one question from someone named Sabina is they had to take the box off of the barn due to starlings getting in. So if they put the box on a pole further in the meadow, how high should it be?
Oh, very good question. It doesn't actually need to be that high up. Sorry that you had the starling problem. Between 8 and 15 feet is sufficient for kestrels. They really don't need to be that high. As for mitigating with starlings, if you have a box that is kind of open access on one side, so for example, This is because western sometimes goes in here and doesn't come out again. This box opens on the front. But if you have your box built in such a way that it opens on the side and you can get easy access to a ladder, that's something I would really recommend, because you want to clean out the box periodically anyway to prevent big parasite buildup. And you could, in theory, just go in there and clean out the starlings, which would encourage other birds to move in. Yeah.
Cool, thank you, Anna. And then Dana wants to know, are American kestrels year-round residents here?
Oh, very good question. Are American kestrels year-round residents here? Not really. They're here for longer than most migratory birds are. So kestrels stay with us. You can see kestrels in some parts of Vermont, especially southern Vermont, through November. And then I used to live in Randolph. I would see kestrels coming back in late February, early March. So that's a very, very small window where they're not here. They're in fact migrating, and they don't actually go that far south either. So they don't leave us for a very long period of time. But they are migratory, and really in the dead of winter, they're not around. They're in the southern states like Virginia and the Carolinas. Yeah.
Perfect, thank you. So we're gonna, I guess, keep moving on. Did we have any more presentation, or is now time for Q&A for you two?
I can go ahead with Q&A. I actually have a surprise second guest.
Oh, okay. Well, let me ask you one more question before you get out your second guest. Alan wants to know, is there an organization in Vermont that tracks the population of birds that are in danger?
That is a very good question. I can take that, Rebecca, or Rebecca jump in if you want to. Vermont Fish and Wildlife keeps track of all of our endangered bird species and endangered species in general. They have a full list of the endangered threatened species in Vermont of birds, mammals, amphibians, reptiles, insects, plants, everything. And there generally are specific fish and wildlife personnel who are assigned to monitoring a specific taxon. So a guy that we work with a lot is John Buck, and he works on the raptors in Vermont. So he is keeping in his mind all the populations of raptors that breed and nest here, including the bald eagle, which is still considered state endangered in Vermont.
Yeah, and then I will just add on to that, the Vermont Center for Eco Studies does a lot in monitoring grassland birds throughout the state. And you can check out their website. I can go ahead and put it in the chat for all to see. And they're doing all kinds of research throughout the state on grassland birds, and I think throughout the region, partnering with other organizations.
Yeah, good stuff. All right, I'm gonna sneak off and sneak back, but keep sending questions.
Cool. So Ginny says, I steward 800 acres of mostly forest, but a few natural meadows in the Northern Kingdom. I have some raptors who have nested on a trail through my property on the way to my pond, and they attack me, wow, and other walkers during nesting season. Sounds pretty aggressive. Would kestrels do the same thing if I encouraged their nesting on my acreage? Rebecca, I don't know if you specifically know anything about that, but we can ask Anna when she gets back. Anna, did you hear that question?
I did, and I can speak to that. There are species of raptors that are more aggressive than others. I'd be curious to know if you know what birds you have. Barred owls and great horned owls are notoriously territorial, as are northern goshawks. And given that you're in the Northeast Kingdom, I would say it's pretty likely that you do have goshawks. Yep. They are like on the spectrum of most aggressive to least aggressive raptors. They are the most. They're like the dictionary definition of aggressive. So my apologies for you. They're beautiful, aren't they? They're wonderful. But yes, the nesting season is a rough time. Kestrels are among the less aggressive species, for sure. They just, by virtue of their size, they would much rather not tangle with things that are too much bigger than them, like human beings. But they can be individuals can be pretty aggressive if they feel that you're really too close to the nest. They may. They probably won't be able to catch them. Yeah, goshawks are more of an ambush predator, and the kestrels are very, very fast. Kestrels are small falcons, after all. So I wouldn't worry about the goshawks eating the kestrels. Yeah. This is Aurora, by the way. Aurora is another grassland bird. He is a barn owl, and he has a very different story from Westbird. Although he is also imprinted, he was bred for education programs. So he's been with us since he was a little baby. He was bred as part of a conservation program in order to promote the people switching away from using rodenticides on their land, which is another great thing to do if you want to avoid having too many pests on your land. Encourage barn owls to live nearby, and they too are cavity nesters. Would you like a piece of chicken while we're talking? Given that barn owls have some of the best hearing in the animal kingdom. It's certainly the best studied auditorily. Scientists have looked at barn owl hearing very, very closely, and they probably have the best hearing in the animal kingdom. This very echoey room is not his favorite place to be. So we may not be here for very long. You want to hang out on perch?
Cool. Well, let's see. We have another Q&A question. Dana wants to know, is lead poisoning an issue with Vermont raptors?
Good question. It isn't as much as it is elsewhere. So kind of the poster child for lead poisoning being a problem right now is the California condor, which we do not have in Vermont. But lead poisoning is not a non-issue for Vermont birds. It was a huge issue for loons many decades ago, but since the banning of lead fishing tackle, it's largely resolved itself. But where the condors get their lead from is from the use of lead ammunition. So if a hunter, shoots a bullet into a deer and guts the deer in the field, takes the carcass home to feed to his family, that gut pile could have fragments of lead ammunition in it. And that's what gets the condors. They eat the gut pile, which is a great thing, good recycling for the ecosystem, but they have no tolerance for any of the lead fragments that are inside. That doesn't happen so much in Vermont because our vultures, the turkey vultures, are actually really, really resistant to lead. They can take a dose of lead that's like 10 times more than a condor can, being half the size, which is amazing. And so bald eagles don't encounter lead nearly as much from that particular avenue. So bald eagles and heavy metal poisoning is not as big a problem in Vermont as it is elsewhere, I will say. Yeah.
Cool, thank you. Let's see, someone else has their hand raised. But if you have your hand raised, I think we already answered that person's question. You can put your question or comment in the Q&A box. There are no more questions coming in from Zoom. I'm not sure. Well, let's see. Sabina wants to know, are the barn owls only in southern Vermont?
Very good question. There are few records of barn owls in Vermont. They are here for certain. They're somewhat more secretive than our barred owls, which are quite obvious. I've heard reports of a barn owl along the Black River, and another report of a barn owl that was just over the border in New York, in the Adirondack State Park. But I personally have never seen a barn owl in Vermont, and it's a very rare occurrence when it does occur. Yeah. I'm actually going to sneak him back because he is not enjoying himself, but I will be here for more questions.
Cool, so if you have any more questions, keep putting them in the Q&A box or the chat.
I thought I had seen a question fly by before, which was, what are the specifications for a kestrel box? So like, how would you build something like this? And while I wish I had those numbers off the top of my head to give you, there's a great resource resource, which is nestwatch.org. So one word, nestwatch.org. That's run by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and they have a great tool on their website called Right Bird, Right House that you can look up or plug in actually your region, your habitat, and it will show you a bunch of downloadable construction plans for myriad different bird species that you could build. Yeah. Right bird, right house. That's the one.
Awesome. I just put that in the chat so you guys can remember that as a resource. That's awesome. Okay, Liz wants to know, is eBird a good way to learn about bird distribution? And maybe you can talk a little bit about what bird distribution means if someone in the audience might not be sure what that is.
Yeah, oh great, I love eBird. eBird is a good way to learn just personally if you are traveling to a new region. I do this a lot. I went and visited Arizona before the whole pandemic happened and used eBird to look around the hotspots in the area that I was visiting so I could know what species to expect to see. In terms of learning about bird distribution, the eBird data actually feeds directly into the All About Birds website, range maps. So it's they have dynamic range maps, which is pretty awesome. You know, if you look at a field guide and you want to know, okay, what's the distribution of the red-winged blackbird, and your field guide's from 1988, that distribution map is going to be outdated. But if you look on All About Birds, they'll show you a distribution map, a range map of where red-winged blackbirds are found now, today, all the time, because they're using the sightings from eBird. So in order to figure out, like, you know, how far north you might expect a barred owl to travel, definitely use the eBird explore function and see their range maps. It's really great. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. That sounds like a great resource. Alan wants to know, well, he says, I find it very curious that since I have been in Vermont, specifically Bethel, on about 50 acres of woodlands, I have only heard barred owls, B-A-R-R-E-D, not yet a horned owl or a screech owl. As far as I know, they're not that habitat specific. Any idea for this situation?
You're right. They are not habitat specific. I used to live in Bethel as well. I've been all around. And if you want to keep your barred owls, you don't want great horned owls. Let me just tell you that right now. If a great horned owl moves into your woods, your barred owls will move on or be eaten because they don't cohabitate. Great horned owls cohabitate with very few species, in fact, because their prey base is just enormous and diverse. So if you don't have a great horned owl because you have barred owls, and if you get one, you won't have barred owls, that kind of thing. The screech owl one is certainly a stumper. You should have screech owls. You might, maybe you don't hear them as much under the cacophony that is barred owls because they can be quite loud. But I would say that you probably do have screech owls in those woods. In addition to the barred owls, they're just so much more difficult to locate, both by their sound and by sight. They're almost invisible. Yeah.
Awesome. I don't think there are any more questions coming in right now from Zoom. If anyone has any, now's your chance. Put them in the Q&A box. Can you talk, Anna, about something that I'm curious about, the texture of owl feathers and how that kind of helps them survive in the wild?
I actually I'll have to run and get another prop, but I actually have a couple little prop wings here. And these are wings we use as educational tools. They came from our rehab patients, patients that didn't survive. So this is the wing of a male American kestrel. You notice how kind of slate blue it is, all up on this side as well. And this is a female American kestrel. So not a juvenile, these are both adults, but the male and the female are dimorphic by color, sort of like cardinals are in that sort of way. And so if you look very, very closely at the leading edge of this wing, you see how kind of straight across that is. It's very stiff and well defined, and it makes a very distinctive snapping noise as the wing moves through the air. But here guys. Here's your great horned owl by contrast. This bird, the leading edge of their wing, I don't know how well, yeah, there it is. You can see all those little eyelashes right there, this kind of hair-like fringe. This is the leading edge of the feather, so this is the part that goes into the wind. And this serves to muffle the sound of the wing as it passes through the air. So the air kind of goes between these little bristles. It creates a bunch of tiny vortices of turbulence, and it silences the wing. So an owl kind of flying by sounds more like a very soft whoosh than a snap of air. And the feather surface on the wing has also got a lot of fuzz to it, for lack of a better term. It's just very, very soft and velvety feeling. Yeah.
Wow, that was an awesome visual. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, we have one last question coming in from Zoom. Sabina says, I have some resident northern harriers in my meadows. Can you speak to their conservation status in Vermont?
Ooh, yeah. I regret that I can't really. I don't know all that much about northern harriers, other than that they're here. They are not endangered, but I don't know if they're any of the kind of sub-listings. There's threatened and there's special concern and whatnot. They are protected, just like any raptor species in the United States is protected under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. But yeah, I've seen harriers in Dead Creek, on the the edges of Lake Champlain. You see them a lot. They're a very special, unique raptor. Oh, okay, yeah. Thank you, Kevin. Yeah. So in the chat, they're SGCN high, so they're closely monitored essentially. But yeah, they're very, very special, bizarre raptors. You know, they have a similar facial disc to an owl, because they probably use their hearing to hunt in grasslands, just like a barn owl would. Very special. We have Erie, a female northern harrier who's from New York that lives at VINS, so come check her out.
Cool, thanks Anna. Thank you, Rebecca. I think we're gonna go ahead and wrap up. Rebecca, if you wanna share your final slide and go over that with everyone.
Yes, let me share my screen. Share.
And thanks to everyone who sent a question in. Those were really good questions. I feel like I just learned a ton.
Great. So yeah, this is our last little slide. Just our thank you slide. And we'll be sending out a short survey after the event, so be sure to check your email for that. We'd love to hear your feedback. Feel free to reach out with any more questions. You can find our contact information on both of our websites, the Vermont Land Trust website and the VINS website. And if you're feeling passionate about the presentation that you just watched, feel free to please donate and support us, so that we can make sure that this work can continue into the future. We really rely on donations from folks like you supporting us. So thank you for that. And thank you for joining us today.
Yay!
Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.